Hi, I'm Rich Harwood, and welcome to another edition, a special edition of Turning Outward Together. Uh, these episodes are to help you stay grounded in these challenging, even crazy times that we're living through right now. You can find previous episodes on our Facebook page. Just go to the banner on at the top, click it on, and you'll find a playlist of the previous editions that we've done during this pandemic. Today, as the pandemic grows and continues, our sense of frustration and loss, even anger, grows as well. And the question is, how do we find a new way to hope during these times? How do we find a new way to hope during these times? Shoot me a message and let me know that you can hear me, that everything is okay technology wise. Let me know where you're calling in from today. And here's a question to think about as we spend the next 20 minutes or so together. How are you finding new ways to hope during these challenging times? For those of us who are just joining us right now, again, I'm Rich Harwood. Welcome to a special edition of Turning Outward Together. You know, over the last week, I've heard from a lot of you. I've received a lot of emails and phone calls. I've been in a lot of meetings. I just spent yesterday morning 2 hours with 60 school superintendents from across Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New Jersey. I sent out a special Sunday letter, as you may have seen, Sunday morning. That was a personal reflection that I got scores of heartfelt personal responses from so many of you. I've been on numerous calls with our coaches from not only the United States, but Canada and Australia. I've been talking to a lot of our partners. And one of the things that I'm struck by, one of the things that really is striking to me, is the sense of loss and the sense of frustration, as I mentioned before, that so many of us, so many of you are feeling today. I just want to share some of the things that people wrote to me just in the last few days. Here's one. One person wrote, quote, "I suppose the challenge becomes that of maintaining the belief that little things can cause change and that there's always reason for hope." This person then went on to write, "Even in the midst of more clearly understanding that the world will never be the utopia I dreamed about in my younger years." Here's another person, someone who wrote me, who said, "It's not clear what the future holds. I don't deal well with uncertainty." I suspect so many of us could have written those words. And here's yet a third person who wrote me, this person from the Midwest, who talked about this crisis and says it drives straight to the issues of racism and inequality and the way this crisis is once again shining a light on those realities. This person then went on to write, "My brain has also been consumed with how best to navigate the grief and the suffering competition that arises in a crisis like this." Maybe you feel that way. Maybe you feel this competition in this crisis that we're seeing. And here's a fourth person who wrote me, where in my Sunday letter I was talking about the challenge that I was facing right now and the focus I was putting on resetting priorities. This person wrote to me, "What should the priorities be?" She asked, "What will make the most difference? What might be the best way to move forward?" In this pandemic, in this time of this pandemic, in these challenging, crazy times in which we're living, it seems to me that so many of us find ourselves in binds. This sense of wanting to hope, but feeling this incredible sense of loss and grief and frustration and even anger. We've come to a place where, for many of us, questions are flooding us, where doubts consume us, and where fears overtake us at times. I know that's true for me. There are binds where we don't exactly know what the right next step is, about where we should turn, who we should turn to, what we should turn to, what priorities we should set. all of these binds, this sense of not knowing what to do, this sense of being consumed by fear, by doubt, it can dispirit us. In fact, it can make us lose hope, as you know. And so when we lose hope, we hunker down, we retreat. Some of us may feel that everything we're doing holds little value or is wholly inadequate. And so we stop. We're stalled, we're stagnated. There are others of us who decide that instead of being stalled, instead of stopping in our tracks, instead of being stagnant, that we decide to run harder, we run faster, we spin more plates. And yet the faster we run, the harder we run, the more plates that we spin, the more we can feel like we're losing ground, that we're simply losing ground. And so the question for today that I feel so many of us, so many of you, I feel myself at times struggling with, is in these times, how do we find a new way to hope? What is a path to a new way to hope? And when I say hope, as so many of you know, I'm not talking about bumper sticker slogans or campaign slogans. I'm not talking about a sense of false hope that so many leaders and others are peddling these days, that somehow this pandemic will be over soon, that we'll just flip a switch and our economy will go back to normal, that our lives will return to something normal, that somehow or another we'll simply walk out the front door of our apartment or our home and things will be like they were before this all started. You and I know that none of those things are true, that kind of false hope only deepens our sense of frustration. It only deepens our sense of loss. It deepens our sense of cynicism. It turns us away from one another right at the moment when we need to be turning toward one another. Instead, I'm talking about real hope, authentic hope. And there are lots of ways that I could talk about it, but I'll just mention these three things: that we have a sense of hope, some modicum of hope, that we can return in a way that each and all of us have a shot at the American dream. That real hope is that we can fulfill our God-given potential, even though right now we may feel that we're nowhere near it, and that it's a distance away from us, and that it's beyond our reach. And that an authentic, real, genuine sense of hope would be that tomorrow can be better than today. That something, just something small, might be better than today. And so what I want to offer today, amid your swirling feelings, amid this sense of loss, amid the sense of grief that we may be feeling, is that I want to ask you to gently step forward, to open yourself up, and to allow yourself to find a new way to hope. And there are three steps, three simple steps that I'm going to ask you to think about, and that I want you to consider, and that I'm hoping you will decide to take. You ready? The first step is this. If we want to find a new way to hope, we need to recognize our losses. We each have losses. We're each suffering different losses. For some of you, like the person who wrote to me, he's suffering the loss from his youth of a feeling, of a desire, of a hope for a more utopian, or at least a more perfect world that seems to have slipped through his hands. For others of us, it is a loss in a sense of security, or as the person wrote, a loss in a sense of certainty that is slipping between or among our fingers. For others of us, or maybe some of us, it is a loss in the plans that we made. I know I feel this way. The plans that I made at the Institute, the new roadmap that we had developed just before this pandemic struck, and that we need to revisit all those plans, remake all those plans. They're gone in so many ways. For others, there is a loss of a job, a loss of a paycheck. There is a loss of our health. There is, for thousands of us, unfortunately, for too many of us, a loss of a loved one. Things have changed. We can't get the past back. We can't somehow return to normalcy. Normalcy, as we knew it at least, is gone. As someone wrote to me this week, another person, when I wrote them an email about loss, they wrote to me, they said, it is good to be able to recognize the regrets or the losses, to hold them, and to give ourselves space to grieve them. In order to move forward, we've got to recognize our losses, each of us, me, you, all of us. What I know is that we can't run from our losses. I've learned that in working in communities and from my own life. We've got to make room for them. We've got to welcome them. We need to embrace them. And ultimately, we need to grieve them. We can't find a new way to hope without first grieving our losses. So that's step number one. Recognize that you are experiencing loss and make room for it, embrace it, and ultimately grieve it. So if the first step is to recognize your losses, the second step is this: to identify your sphere of influence. We need to figure out where each of us need to figure out. You need to figure out, most importantly, where you can take action, what plans you can act on, where you can make a difference. We're all struggling with a sense of agency, with a lost sense of agency. We all want to reclaim and regain and rediscover and act on a sense of personal agency and collective agency. It's one of the most important things we need in our lives. It gives us the sense of power to act and to be effective and to shape our surroundings. And so I'm asking you to pay attention to where is it in your life, where in your sphere of influence can you gain a sense of agency? Can you reclaim it, rediscover it, remake it? Each of us is going to find something different. There are some people who wrote to me who are funders. They're running a foundation. They have dollars. I just spoke to a foundation executive yesterday who was talking about trying to get relief money out. And for her, she can find a sense of agency in dealing with the inequities, with the racism, with the gaps in income and in people's lives that need to be filled, that need to be stopgapped to give people a sense of hope. She has the ability to do that through the resources that she stewards every day. Not every one of us has those resources. Most of us don't. So for the rest of us, there are some of us who are in organizations where we can gather our staff each morning or each day or periodically, and we can talk about the losses we've experienced and the things that we can affect through our daily work. What is it that we can still affect? What partner can we still reach out to? What group can we still engage? How can those of us together think about what it is that we can achieve in our work, even the small steps, most importantly, the small steps. And for some of us, it may be simply, but importantly and vitally and critically, it may just be reaching out to one person, just one, picking up the phone or scheduling a Zoom or Skype session and asking someone how they're doing and reconnecting with them and talking with them, and importantly, listening closely to them. In my faith, I'm Jewish, as many of you know. In my faith, I am taught if you save one life, you save the world. I believe that. It guides the work I do each and every day. My question for you is, what's your sphere of influence? Where can you act? The goal for you, the goal for all of us, is not to take on the world. It's not to think that we can solve all these problems alone. It's not that we can change the trajectory of our communities by ourselves. The goal for us is simply to reach out and touch one life. And in doing so, understand that we are helping to save the world. So if the first one is to recognize your losses, and the second step that you can take is to identify your sphere of influence, the third step is this: stay attached to your larger purpose. Stay attached to your larger purpose. And I ask you, what is your larger purpose? I know you have one. I know it may be dampened right now. I know you may be dispirited about it. I know for some of us, we may have even given up on it. But it's still there. You still have it. Maybe you've rediscovered in some new way a different larger purpose, or you've refined your larger purpose through this experience, or you've redefined it. But what I'm asking you to do is to claim it, to know it, to name it. And no worries, as I said before, you may not be able to act on it right now. You may not be able to manifest it right now. You may not be able to make it a reality right now. Don't worry about it. Give yourself a break. Give yourself permission not to have to take on the entire world and to achieve all of your larger purposes. Just let it come to you. Just open yourself up to it. And when you do, I want you to think about the following things. When you think about your larger purpose, what does it sound like? What does it sound like when you talk about it, when you speak it out loud? What are the words that come out? And what does it sound like? At times when you've acted on your larger purpose before, or when you can imagine acting on your larger purpose now, what is the feeling that comes into you? What does it feel like? I'm not asking you, what do you think about? I'm not asking you, what do you know about? I'm not asking you, what does the data say? I'm asking you to remember the feeling that comes over you, the feeling that fills you, the feeling that stirs within you when you think about this larger purpose. When you talk to other people, what is it that you say to them about this larger purpose? And I would urge you to pick up the phone, to schedule a Zoom meeting, to do something, to go see your spouse or partner or your child or your neighbor 6 feet apart. But to speak out loud your larger purpose, because when you say it out loud, you name it. And when you name it, it becomes real. And when it becomes real and you name it to someone else, you can hold it together and not just on your own. And then I want you to write it down. Write it down on a piece of paper or talk it in to some tape recorder or onto your phone, your iPhone, your smartphone, so that you can remember it. And on those days when you're feeling lost, when you're feeling dispirited, when you're trying to find a new way to hope, pull out what you've written down or turn on what you've recorded on your phone so you can remember. Staying attached to your larger purpose helps you find hope because you realize you have a mission that is larger than this context in which we're living, that transcends this pandemic, and that there's something larger and bigger in your life that you're working toward, even if, and especially if, you can't achieve it right now. And so I just want to remind you, as I said to the 60 school superintendents that I talked to earlier this week, yesterday morning, I want to remind you that we need you, that we need you. Yes, we need frontline doctors and frontline nurses and EMT workers and manufacturers of face masks and all sorts of other things. But we need you. We need you to step forward and open yourself up and engage with other people. We need you to keep your larger dreams alive. We need you to keep your larger sense of purpose alive. We need you to keep fighting for what is right and good in our society. We need you to be an example of what is the best in us and the best of us, and that we don't have to settle for the path of division and acrimony and divisiveness that has for too long enveloped and engulfed our country, that it is possible and we are capable of getting on a new path, a more hopeful path, a more inclusive path, where not just some of us get to move forward and fulfill our God-given potential, but where all of us go on the same journey in common cause, with a common purpose, in a common direction together. And so my hope for you today is that you take good care of yourself, that you remain in good health and good spirits, and that in doing so, that you don't turn away from others, but you turn toward one another. And in doing so, let us individually and let us collectively find a new way to hope. Thanks so much for joining us today. This is another special episode of Turning Outward Together. We'll be back next week, same time, Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find the other episodes on our Facebook page. Just click on that banner and you'll find a playlist. And if this message resonated with you, if this message today spoke to you, if there's something in it that you think someone else might benefit from, I ask you to share it with others, spread it with others, so that maybe they can find a new way to hope amid these challenging, crazy times. Thanks so much. Be well.